Hi everyone, welcome back to RBT training. So we just finished up a little bit more about reinforcement, differential reinforcement. Now let's talk about some really important things to consider when using reinforcement, and then different types of prompting and fading off procedures that go along with reinforcement. Um, so let's start by talking about reinforcement in terms of prompting. So, whenever we provide reinforcement or we're teaching a skill and then reinforcing it, we always want to try to encourage independence. Okay, because that's our ultimate goal, is that once we teach this skill, this individual is able to do it by themselves without having to be given an M&M or thrown a party. Okay, but that's not always easy to do. So oftentimes we really have to specifically plan on exactly how we're going to maintain this skill over time, how we're going to generalize it. Remember generality. Across settings and people, and then also how we're going to fade out our reinforcement procedure that we have in place. So keeping that in mind, when we teach, we always want to try to use the least amount of prompting possible with most of our clients. And that's what we call least to most prompting. There are some exceptions where you might have an individual who, has a pretty severe disability and might need a more consistent approach and need a lot more initial prompting. So for that student, we might actually do what we consider most to least prompting to give them more initial help, so that they don't even have the opportunity to mistake, and then slowly and gradually we fade off, okay? But I think for the most part you're going to come across in your settings least to most prompting. So I want to create a hierarchy for you of prompting, something that you'll see over time. Typically, remember we talked a little bit about how we create our program sheets before, so we went through that diagnostic process of looking at the VB map or the ABLES and figuring out what skills they need. Then when we create a lesson or a skill set for an individual to learn, typically there's a data sheet that goes along with it and a program sheet. Within either the data sheet or the program sheet, if not both, you should be able to find exactly what that prompt hierarchy is. And so here, and there'll be an additional copy of this within the web for you to take a peek at as well. But our hierarchy is, we have full prompt, then we have partial prompt, we have a gestural prompt, and then an independent prompt. Okay? And then the directions in here lay out exactly what it is that we expect for you to use within that prompt hierarchy. So again, we'll be going over more data sheets in the future when we get down to our really discrete trial teaching section. But for right now, just keep that in mind, that you should be able to find a prompt hierarchy with all the programs that you're looking at. And if you don't know what you should be doing, then, ask someone. Say, hey, is this supposed to be least to most to least, or am I skipping a few steps in between? Because it's important, because remember, consistency is key when we're teaching our individuals, and everyone's going to be a little bit different depending on their need. So let's create a hierarchy here. Drop my marker. We're going to do a pyramid. At the bottom of our pyramid is going to be what we call the most intrusive prompt. Can you guess what that is? That's full physical guidance. Okay, often you will see this labeled either full manual guidance FMG or FP for a full prompt, okay, or full physical. All right, the next least intrusive prompt is also going to be physical, but it's going to be partial, okay? All right, and so this would probably be PP for partial physical or partial prompt. All right. So full physical would be something like, say I ask my individual, I give them the prompt, get the marker. Wait a second or two, they don't get the marker. I would literally take their hand off of the table, guide them to grab the marker, probably full hand over hand, help them pick it up and put it back and say, that's getting the marker. Okay, so that's full physical. You are literally guiding them every step of the way. Partial physical is less intrusive in that you're going to use some part of their body to guide them toward what it is that you want them to do. So some programs actually break this down into multiple steps within partial physical, okay? So partial physical could start at maybe the forearm. So you guide them just to touch the item with their forearm. Or it could be at the elbow, a light touch on the elbow. Or it could be the upper arm, just a little tap at the shoulder, just to get them to push. A light prompt towards the item, okay? Just giving them a little extra help to initiate that movement, all right? So that's your partial physical prompt. And so you would want to specify, if this is on your data sheet, that exactly what type of partial physical prompt. Is it going to be a light tap at the elbow, or is it going to be like maybe just a guide here at the arm, or just a push on the shoulder? Or if you're walking down the hallway and your program is walking, you know, what is that? Is it both hands, one on each shoulder, or is it just a light touch on the back, okay? So all of those things are really important to know so that you're implementing the program the same way as other people who are implementing it, okay? So that's our partial physical. Next, less intrusive prompt is going to be a model. Okay, this is often with an M. Sometimes this isn't in our programs. I don't often include this in the data sheet just because it confuses people. But model is exactly as it sounds. You would say, get the marker. They didn't get the marker. So then you're going to say, get the marker. And that's getting the marker. Your turn, get the marker. Okay, that would be our model. Next, less intrusive is using something like a visual or picture. We'll call that a visual prompt. I don't want to confuse you here, so we're just going to do V for visual. So this might be something like having a marker and your child doesn't respond to the direction, get the marker. So the next time that you present it, you might include a picture when you give that verbal request. So you might have a picture of the marker and say, get the marker with the visual. And so that visual cue is the prompt, okay? Then the next piece is going to be a verbal. Then that's why I didn't want to do the VP, because I use this a lot. and label it VP for a verbal prompt. So this occurs a lot when you are doing some sort of like do this auditory program, or you're doing a fill in the blank, like an introverbal, okay? So for example, or if you're doing like an expressive program, so if you're holding up a picture of a firefighter, it's a community helper program, and they're identifying community helpers expressively. You're going to hold up the picture and say, what is it? Wait a second. Do they respond? No. So then here you might give a verbal prompt, okay? You might say, firefighter, right? And you hope that by giving that initial verbal prompt, that initial sound, that it's enough to elicit a response, all right? And that would be a verbal prompt. And just like within partial prompting here, there's different levels of verbal prompt. So you could give a full verbal prompt, you could give a partial verbal prompt, depending on the program. Again, that should be very specific. So if you're unsure, ask, because it might just be that initial sound, or it could be the whole first word, fire and firefighter, right? So always clarify, just to make sure you're on the same page as everyone else. The next one is gestural. Okay, and that would be GP. So if we have the marker out here, and you say, get the marker, a gestural prompt would be something like this. Okay, you're pointing toward it. You're giving a hint, like, hey, you're supposed to be getting the marker, okay? And last but not least, natural cue. Or none. Okay? So that is our hierarchy. So if we are going this way, we are going most to least prompting. And if we're going from the top down, we're going least to most. So again, for the most part, you're going to be using least to most prompting to try to encourage that independence with our students. However, you can see why for learners that might have a really difficult time learning initial steps or are really slow to learn, that using a full physical prompt at the beginning to give them a model of exactly what you expect them to do might be more beneficial. Okay? All right. So that is our pyramid of prompting, or prompting hierarchy. Let's talk a little bit about some other specifics to using prompting. So when we prompt, we always want to make sure that obviously we're 100% consistent in the way that we deliver our prompting, so that the way that we're doing it is the same as the next person that might be coming and implementing the same program. That way your child knows exactly what to expect.